What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here for another important conversation, I will say. We're sitting down with Larry Lepard from EM2. What's going on, sir?
Oh, not much, Marty. It's really nice to be with you. It's kind of an honor. I understand you're like one of the leading podcasts in this space, and I haven't been as involved in Bitcoin for as long. So,
Well, the honor is all mine. As we've been having we've been talking for almost 20 minutes now since before we hit record here. I think it's going to be an incredible conversation. I think we're going to learn a lot as Bitcoiners. I don't want to say there's goals of this conversation, but I do want to say just having spoken with you over DM chat in the first 20 minutes of this conversation, I think there are important lessons that you can provide the Bitcoin world coming from the gold world. You've seen a lot of shit. To give some more context to the freaks out there listening, Parker Lewis and Michael Tanguma, two Bitcoiners, have been saying, Marty, you got to talk to Larry. You got to talk to Larry. His story is incredible, and I think it would resonate a lot with the freaks. And so, you're a man that's seen some shit, and you have.
yeah, yeah. You want me to go through a little bit of the background? I'll skip on it quickly. So, I'm 64 years old. I've been a professional investor my whole life. I've always been a sound money advocate. I was a big Ron Paul supporter. Ran a couple of ads for him in national newspapers. Long before Bitcoin came along, sound money was gold and silver, and of course, I owned a ton of it and was supporting that. I first heard about Bitcoin from the Free State Project up in New Hampshire. I have a friend up there who was a graphic designer. She bought a bunch of coins at $2, still has them. I mean, a lot of coins. It's really a fabulous story. I didn't know how to buy them back then. This was pre-Mt. Gox. This is when you had to meet with cash and you got yourself a little code. I almost bought some Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox failed. Coming out of that, I bought my first coins coming out of when Coinbase was running. So I've been in Bitcoin for a while, and I've bought fairly consistently. But my fear was always that technology was, technology, and my IBM computer would go blue screen every now and then. I thought, well, maybe that'll happen to Bitcoin. Of course, that over time, I got more and more comfortable with that issue. I sat next to a core developer at MIT once, and I asked him, what scares you? And he said, well, every time I make a change to the core, I'm a little afraid I'm going to go home and the whole thing's going to blow up. And that kind of concerned me. But anyway, eventually I began to hodl very consistently. And, I was hodling at 17,000, and, I was hodling at 10,000, and I was hodling at 3,500. So I've been at it for a while, but frankly, gold has always been the core of my holdings. It still is. I still own a ton of gold. But I think what I might bring to the party that people will find interesting is I've watched the government's moves against gold all these years, and there have been many, and they've been substantial. And the government. I mean, I think Bitcoiners look. I think Bitcoin is a fabulous technology. I think it's going to win in the long run. I'm very much a believer, but I don't think it's going to be quite a straight line as some people think. And I say that with the experience of having watched what they've done in the gold space. They've obviously manipulated gold with paper gold, and these people are playing for keeps, right? And they're criminal, and they use whatever they can to beat the other side. And they're very smart. I mean, there are all kinds of papers that have been written. Gibson's Paradox by Barsky and Summers laid out the whole notion of how by suppressing the gold price, they could create, an economic boom. And, Secretary Rubin, who was the Treasury Secretary at the time, used it to manipulate the gold price and, make Bill Clinton's presidency look very fabulous. But, when they get the chance, they break the rules. I mean, they confiscated gold in the 30s. They took us off gold in the 70s. They've never reported the amount of gold that's in Fort Knox. They've created paper gold to great excess. I always get a kick. People say, well, the monetary premium is going to come out of gold. Well, there is no monetary premium in gold. I mean, gold should be trading. If gold were trading the way it used to trade in relation to the money supply, it would be $10,000 right now. So the monetary premium in gold has been kicked, the shit's been kicked out of it. It's maybe a little bit there, and there's a little jewelry premium, but it costs $1,000 an ounce to mine it. So it's not like there's a big premium in it. I think that on a go forward basis, they're going to try some of these things with Bitcoin. This talking about this ETF that's coming out, as we were discussing it before. I think, and people ask the question rightly and intelligently, can't they just do that what they did to gold? And I would say I view that in two ways. One, yes, maybe. Well, I say one, no, because here's why. Bitcoin has gone up 500% in 6 months in the past, and anybody who shorts against that and doesn't have the keys or doesn't have the coins on the chain is going to get completely wrecked. Okay, so for that reason, because gold never went up 500% in 6 months, and they always knew that if they shorted gold, there'd come a time in the future when they may be able to cover it. They were very effective at manipulating gold. So that in that sense, the volatility of Bitcoin is a positive because it makes it harder to manipulate it. But then let me give you the conspiracy case on the whole issue. And I've spoken to various people all throughout the gold industry over the years about this, and it's an interesting question. What if the government has an unlimited balance sheet? What if the government operates through offshore accounts? And what if the government doesn't care about the P&L and can create unlimited amounts of money to cover losses? Well, in that particular case, they could sell short into the Bitcoin market and just keep selling short and keep selling short and keep selling short, and the losses could pile up. And to the degree they had to settle the losses, they would just print the money and deliver. And so the losses would get settled, but they would just never relent. And so in the ultimate manipulation game, think of manipulation as like a game of poker where you're playing table stakes, and you don't have to necessarily show the cards. If you're playing table stakes poker and the other player has an unlimited balance sheet and can just keep putting more and more stakes on the table but not caring about what those are, because those are stakes they print and that they can create in an unlimited fashion, then they can conceivably go longer than you can because their balance sheet's bigger than your balance sheet. And to some degree, that's what's happened in gold, in my opinion. And I can't prove it, that they have this unlimited balance sheet, but I think there's a possibility of it. And I think for Bitcoiners not to consider it is a blind spot, that it is a possibility. And so, I think as we were discussing before, I strongly advise all my clients to have some Bitcoin because I think it will ultimately demonetize gold. The time frame on that's debatable. But I also strongly believe that having gold is useful as well. And partly because, other countries in the world have made an enormous bet on gold. I think I think it's a mistake, but China's obviously betting on gold. Russia's betting on gold. And so, my view is as a money manager and one who runs a fund, my view is that the intelligent approach to this is to have some balance between the two. And I view gold as being more like a sound money bond that doesn't grow nearly as fast as Bitcoin, but never suffers a yearly drawdown of more than 20 or 30%. And I think of Bitcoin as being a sound money animal, growth stock that is eating everything in its sight and growing at 200% a year compounded. So we all love that. But, the negative, the thing that I think is, people who are recommending other people where to put their money, they need to do is they need to make sure that the people who are doing it fully understand what it looks like and what the issues are. Because I know of many instances, and I think it's sad, where people, who believed in it went home at Thanksgiving in 2017 and pounded the table and got all their friends and neighbors to chase it and buy it at 17,000. And then, of course, it went up and over the cliff and came back to 10, and then a year later to 3,500. And damn near all those people blew it out, which, of course, was the wrong thing to do. So, if you're selling it and the buyer doesn't understand the importance of hodling, then you're not doing the buyer a favor, And I think that's an important point that needs to be made when people are promoting Bitcoin.
I would agree. 26-year-old Marty made that Thanksgiving mistake in 2017 and had learned. It isn't easy because they're internally, you're like, I've had this feeling since 2013 when I first got in, like, this is going to happen. This is going to be massive. You want your family and friends to participate. But you do have to realize that they have to have a first principles understanding of why sound money, number one, should win out and probably will win out in the long run. I mean, the government obviously is bankrupt and they can't keep printing forever. Things will hit ahead. Sound money will prevail at some point. It's a matter of if, not when. But we were discussing before we hit record, I had the pleasure of getting breakfast with Josh Crum last week, and he is behind Gold Money and BitGold and Mene, and that was one of the things he said, him and Roy Sabag, when they were going out and pitching BitGold specifically, is that they wanted to change the narrative around sound money goods, particularly gold and silver, particularly gold. I don't know if they dealt too much with silver, but a lot of gold bugs and gold heads at the time were saying gold's going to go to 10,000, and they really wanted to shift the narrative of, yes, it may go to 10,000, but it'll go to 10,000 because it is a sound money. I think, why will sound money be that valuable in the future? And I think that's something that Bitcoiners and gold bugs alike. I hate saying gold bugs. Gold
supporters. I don't mind gold bugs. I don't view it as an insult anymore. I mean, it's sound money. I mean, I'm giving a speech in New Orleans this week, which will be up on the web and shown around it. And to me, sound money is the most important moral issue of our time. I mean, I'm right where Jack Mallers is. I'm willing to die on this hill. I mean, I think I look at the world what it was like when I was a kid, and I look at the world today, and the biggest difference is the money's unsound. And that's the bad news. The good news is that, this is a system that's designed to fail, and it's going to blow up spectacularly. And then we will go back to sound money in a variety of forms. And really, when I say sound money, what I really mean is non-state money. I mean, that's, if you think about it, fiat money is a statist, thing that's created to control people. I mean, look at the $600 they want us to report now. It's insane, right? And so, gold, silver, and Bitcoin are forms of money that the state cannot control. And that's a beautiful thing. Now, I say that and then recognizing that they're probably going to try. We were talking about this. They're probably going to try to make us report our Bitcoin. And of course, we'll all have to make decisions on how much we want to play along with that. But I don't think they can kill it. But, I do think that there will be ups and downs. I mean, they certainly could go after Tether. And if and when they do that, I mean, I think that'd be a net positive. If and when they do that, it could certainly create a dip in the Bitcoin price. So my view is it's a volatile asset, but it's probably the best asset on the planet right now in terms of optionality and asymmetry. But it's also volatile. And the way you deal with that is you allocate the right amount to handle that volatility so that you won't get blown out at the bottom, and you dollar cost average on the way in. I have new clients walk in the door, they have zero of it. And I say, you got to get some, pick a number, pick a percent. But understand that if it dips 30% or 50%, I mean, recently it dipped from 60 to 30, I was a buyer. I'm a buyer at 60, by the way, but at 30, I stepped it up a little bit. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's what I say to clients, this is the classic buy the dip asset, and not necessarily sell the rip, just buy, go at it in a steady way. It's the other thing about it that I find fascinating is just all the leverage in some of these, BlockFi. I mean, all these people who are using leverage with this asset are absolutely insane, in my opinion, just insane. That's a sure way to lose your money. That you gotta buy this stuff unlevered and just be prepared to hold on.
We've seen untold number of people get wrecked by this, like leverage trading Bitcoin, and it's very attractive. The nature of Bitcoin and the fact that it can evade state sanctions, and it is a completely separate network, distributed network. There's services out there that'll give you 100x leverage, and people.
Oh, I know. I mean, those services ought to be shut down because there's no way. The house wins all the time. I mean, there's no way you can win playing that game. Even 5-to-1 leverage, there's no way you can win. They're sure to, they're going to liquidate you on a drawdown. That's it. You're out of the game.
Yeah,
it's theft. It's really theft.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of these margin trading platforms pop up throughout the years. The OKC wood chipper was a fun order book to watch back in the day, like 2013, 2014.
Yeah, I didn't follow a lot of that as carefully, as closely as you guys have. I mean, I've just been stacking. I mean, I like your statement of stacking sats and getting people to stack sats. I think that's right. I mean, that will do extremely well. I was very satisfied this morning. I got an email from a woman I counseled about 5 or 6 years ago. She didn't have a lot of money, and I convinced her to put $20,000 into Bitcoin. And she came back, she said, holy shit, I hadn't looked at this account for a while and it's worth 250 now. And I was like, yeah, that felt really good. You know what I mean? It's fun to watch people, do the right thing, save in a sound currency, and it goes up, it goes up over time.
Well, that's, I think, the beauty stacking sats, particularly in dollar cost averaging and having a plan,
Right.
sticking with it, really highlights the importance of low time preference. So there's like a compounding effect of the Bitcoin price going up, but also the societal lesson of low time preference, which I think many would argue the fiat system has degraded pretty significantly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it relates to everything. I mean, Jeff Booth has great stuff on this. I mean, we should live in a deflationary world. A deflationary world is a much better and fairer world where things get cheaper and savers get rewarded. And, Keynesianism and the notion that growth is good at all costs. I mean, how do you do that in a fixed resource planet? We're going to destroy the planet. If all we do is figure out how to grow, eventually we're going to overwhelm the planet, and we're going to be like, the deer on the island up in, the licking eating deer up on the island off of Alaska. I mean, where you just hit a level and then bam, the whole damn thing collapses. I mean, what we need is much greater efficiency, productivity and efficiency. We need to figure out how to get more for less. And that's deflation by definition. How do you get more for less? And so when we take this whole Keynesian paradigm and blow it up, which it's in the process of doing, and put it on its head, we're going to be in a deflationary world. And that's going to be an absolute thing of beauty. I mean, you're going to be able to save and know your money is good. In fact, you're going to know that with savings, your money is going to get better in the future, and you'll have hope. I mean, one of the things that really distresses me, because I know a lot of people at this age, I know people my age who have reasonable assets and they're trying to retire. They don't feel like they can. And the reason they don't feel like they can is they don't know if they're going to outrun their money. They might have a number that a young person would say, well, that's a lot of money. You got $1 million. Well, you're 70 years old, you got $1 million. Is that really a lot of money? I mean, if gasoline's $100, it's not a lot of money. And that could be where we're going, and so, this whole Keynesian, grow at any cost, inflate as necessary to keep the growth going, it eliminates people's freedom to save and their freedom to retire safely. And it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And, and then of course it rewards those who figured out how to play the system, and then they changed the rules. 2008, they completely, raided the system, and, it was socialism for the rich and rugged capitalism for everybody else as they lost their houses to foreclosure. I mean, it's absolutely so upside down, backwards, wrong. And yet the number of people that understand it in society today, it's a small group. It's gold people, sound money people, and Bitcoin people. The good news is that group is growing, over time. I mean, and I think we are getting closer to a tipping point. I mean, the inflation problem has become really obvious and is only going to get worse. And, the solutions are becoming more widely known. I can't tell you how happy I was when Safe's book came out and I saw the effect on the millennial generation. I mean, my kids are all in their 20s and they're all huge Bitcoiners, and not just because dad's a sound money guy, but because they read the book. And, suddenly we had this whole young cadre of Austrians, I mean, I was like this old guy Austrian, and people were like, oh, you're a fossil, don't talk about gold. And suddenly we got all these converts who get the sound money story because of Safe's book. It was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. It was like we, the reinforcements have come to help us out here. We've been fighting this battle for 30 years with no new blood. Now we got new blood, so it's great.
I mean, you think it was Safe's book alone, or do you think there's like a sort of timing aspect of it too? Like, I'm a millennial, I'm 30. I was a senior in high school in 2008. Serendipitously is probably the better word, taking an elective economics class. My dad was like, yeah, take an economics class. You're going to go to college. Take that. So that was fall of 2008. World's falling apart. My teacher's like, boys, this is what's an all guys school. This is not good. Like, you should go to college and try to understand this. So I did.
Yeah.
For me personally, I won't speak for my whole generation, but like there were 9/11 when I was 10, 08 when I was 17. like you said, the government tends to fuck things up. And '08 particularly, I read the TARP bill as a 17-year-old senior in high school. I was like, this is corrupt. This is evil. You said criminal. I would say evil, which I think takes it a step further. It's truly evil and nefarious. Do you think there was a generation of people around my age just looking for a solution and sound money?
That may be so. I mean, maybe I'm giving SAFE too much credit, but I do know SAFE's book moved the needle for a lot of people.
Certainly, I agree.
I'm
one of the biggest advocates for the Bitcoin standard and SAFE's work.
I mean, no, I think that's right. I mean, you guys could see how broken it was, and it was kind of like, man, this is messed up. I mean, I've heard plenty of stories from people who said, this is really personal for me. My parents lost their house. My dad lost his job. I mean, we were in economic, tough straits. I mean, my sister lost her house. I mean, these people have done a lot of damage to a lot of people in this country, and I mean, it's tragic. I mean, look at what's happened in the Midwest. Look at, what I call the economic despair that has led to, the drug overdoses and the fentanyl. And I mean, there's just so much, the suicides and mental health issues. I mean, it's just so many bad things that have happened. And, and then we go get in these overseas wars. And so, honorable, hardworking, honest guys and girls who get involved in these things, and they're getting limbs blown off in places where they shouldn't be. And it's tragic. It's so tragic. I mean, that part reminds me of Vietnam, which was in my youth. I mean, it just, and I mean, I think Ron Paul has one of the greatest lines where he said, it's no coincidence that, the century of war, or the century with the greatest wars coincides with the century of central banking. I mean, the Fed was formed in 1913. 3 years later, they broke their charter and they went out and they started they started printing money so they could fund the war. I mean, which wouldn't have been able to, the war would have been unfundable if it hadn't been for fiat money. And, so it's a very evil set of circumstances, as you say. And there are some very evil people. I mean, look, the defense contractors have done really well for the past 30 years, I mean, Afghanistan was a complete, boondoggle for them. They made tons and tons of money, but maybe not so good for the Afghans, and certainly not so good for our people who got shot up. One of the workouts that I do in CrossFit is called Murph, and it's named after a really heroic and honorable guy, Michael Murphy, who was the guy, in the movie and the story. It was kind of the last guy out, and it was. It's just terrible stuff, really terrible stuff. So,
I mean, I hate to dive too deep into war here. What do you think too? Like the returns on war, they're negative, right? Because you just piss people off in far off lands that then want to attack you again, and then you just create this negative feedback loop that perpetuates.
Edwin Starr had it right. I don't know if you they probably don't play it much anymore, but there was a really great song in the '70s. Edwin Starr's War. The title was just War, and I said, "What is it good for? Absolutely nothing."
Yeah.
I mean, and that's right. I mean, that's absolutely right. And the funny thing is, human beings alone don't necessarily want to go to war with each other. Although I suppose criminals go to war with society because they want to kill people and steal stuff. But in general, the average American guy, living out in the woods, in America somewhere, he doesn't want to go over to Vietnam and kill a bunch of guys in Vietnam. I mean, the average rice farmer in Vietnam doesn't necessarily want to kill a bunch of Americans, but if Americans are walking around in his country, that's not going to make him happy. And, it's these governments that are doing it. And that speaks to the broader trend of decentralization. I mean, I think we hit peak centralization in this century, and I think we World War II was, it was a killing orgy. 40 or 50 million people, killed in that war. And, fortunately, I think, we kind of have learned something from it, because at least since then, the wars have been more proxy wars at a smaller scale. But, I'd like to see a situation where, these nation states kind of dissolve. I mean, it's not entirely clear we need them, and that we can't go back to much smaller, decentralized local governments.
I've been pushing that line of thinking for quite some time. I think we're going to see balkanization. I think we've seen a trend towards that in the last year and a half, with states asserting their autonomy more and more.
Well, you live in one. I mean, I bought a small place in one. I mean, I think Florida and Texas should just say bye-bye, I mean,
Right.
we'll pay our share of the national defense, all that other stuff. Leave us alone.
Please just leave us alone. You make things worse.
Yeah.
That's it. This is the other thing, right? Like, I think, and so that was another part of the pre-discussion that we're having. Is like, so you think that this could be a much longer battle than many Bitcoiners tend to believe. I believe
Yeah.
I'm one of those Bitcoiners. Maybe I'm naive, like I said, maybe I'm not. But I think it's becoming too blatantly obvious that the emperor wears no clothes, and that people are going to be begging for a sound money solution or a
Yeah.
something that
I,
erodes the government's power.
I don't think you're naive. And I think the emperor's very naked. I think more people are seeing that. I don't know how it's going to get resolved. Um, I don't necessarily think it's going to get down to shooting in a civil war. I tend to think that what will happen is that things will continue to get much worse, first in terms of inflation, and then in terms of confidence in money. And these markets will be able to function in a way that puts the fear of God into the government, and they'll have to either start behaving better, and they may do a little bit of that, but more likely, or get overturned. And so, I think this Francis Suarez in Miami is probably going to be, president of the United States someday, and he's a Bitcoiner. I say this because I think, Ron Paul was ahead of his time, right? There was a small core of us who all believed in him, supported him, worked for him. And he kind of timed out, he's too old to be president now, but your generation, I mean, and this fits into the fourth turning, and I'm sure you're familiar with that whole model and so forth. I mean, these fourth turnings tend to take 20 to 30 years, and you can either argue this one started in 2000 or 2008. So, if it's 10 years, I mean, we're already past that. I mean, probably 20 years. I think it's going to get resolved in the next 10 or 15 years. I think your generation is going to be the hero generation that's going to fix it. And I think that, the fixing it is going to come at a political level. And, you're going to see, people like Gabby or people like, Suarez or other libertarian-minded, freedom-oriented, sound money-oriented people step into the breach. And when the country has been ravaged by inflation and is feeling very much poorer, and society is really in tough shape, kind of 1930s shape in a way, this message will get out. And I think people will be smart enough to know that it was the money that did it to them. And they're going to say, yeah, I'm voting for that sound money person.
Yeah.
I want to go there.
Well, let's dive into this a little bit more, because Bitcoiners, a lot of Bitcoiners, I would say myself included, but I have, there have been some people that have put strong arguments in front of me, which is beginning to persuade me back towards the other direction. But Bitcoiners, a lot of us will say, don't even engage in politics. Like, Bitcoin is so strong, we can build this parallel system and essentially bleed the political system dry, and essentially just leave these people, do like a gulch, and just leave, let them mess up the world, and we'll be fine over here.
It's possible. I mean, I think certainly in terms of your own monetary sovereignty and wealth, that's possible. Mm-hmm. But, if they decide they want you to report how much Bitcoin you have, and they want you to pay a tax on it, maybe 90%, and, I've seen, articles that have talked about, and some of the people in the community have talked about this, how, look, the other side are a bunch of really bad people, and we know they will break the rules, and they are going to try to change the narrative to these Bitcoin and gold people ruined a system that we had that was perfectly good, and they ruined it, and you know what? Therefore, they need to either go to jail or pay a huge tax on their winnings. Now, look, we all know with 12 words, we can decide we're not Americans anymore and go somewhere else, and we've still got our wealth. But the point is, I'd like to stay in America. I think it's a beautiful place, and I've got a lot of ties and relatives and everything else here. So, I'm more inclined to stay and fight. And I think, as I look at the country, I think a lot of the country, when they get more educated on this issue, I tend to believe this is a pretty good country with a lot of great people in it. And I think we'll do the right thing. And so, yeah, look, you can do a gulch and go somewhere else. I get that. And that may be necessary for short periods of time if this thing goes in the wrong direction really hard and really fast. But I think as a practical matter, we've got to think about, we can't ignore politics. We've got to think about how politics, can fix it. Having said that, it's generally the case that in all countries, to the degree we're going to have a national state, that in all countries, the richest people end up kind of in politics. And what if the Bitcoin people and the gold people had all the marbles? I mean, what if we were the richest people? I mean, I'd certainly rather live in a country that was, that the politicians were Bitcoiners and gold people than the politicians we have today, right? Because I think we'd embrace libertarian values and low taxes and so on and so forth. So, it's very hard to tell how it's going to unfold, no doubt. But interesting questions for sure.
No, I agree. I mean, and again, even as a Bitcoiner, we had examples of playing the political game somewhat working in our favor. Obviously, when Steve Mnuchin was on his way out, tried to sneak some aggressive legislation across. People fought back. That didn't get passed. Senators like Cynthia Lummis and representatives like Warren Davidson and many others beginning to advocate for Bitcoin. It seems like that's having a positive effect on.
I agree. I think there's another thing that we've really got going for us. Luke Groman has pointed this out. And I really do believe it's true. And there's a fellow whose name I can't remember right now up in MIT who's doing a lot of work on it with this space project. But I think the Pentagon knows.
Jason Lowery.
Yeah, Jason. Right. I think the Pentagon knows that it's strategically in our interest to move in this direction. I mean, I think they've seen how we've been weakened by offshoring, by all the theft of all the technology from China and offshoring everything to China and letting the country slide and gutting the middle class in the middle of the country. And I think they're very much aware that we got to solve this problem or we're going to just completely go down the shitter. Mm-hmm. And so, they've got to be thinking about the sound money, equation. And I'm pretty sure Luke has some really good contacts in the defense community because of the information that he and I discuss. And as a result of that, I'm pretty sure the Pentagon understands that we've got to get back to sound money. And I in turn, I also think they're going to understand as a result of Jason's work and others that probably the better choice of sound money is Bitcoin over gold and silver. And the reason for that is that if we go back to a gold standard, Russia, China, and India, three fairly corrupt countries, have a big lead over us. I mean, Ron Paul told me once he's pretty sure that we don't have the gold we say we have in Fort Knox, and I believe that. I mean, I think that's probably been raided and sold if you read, things, and I think there's a reason why it hasn't been audited. So, assuming they've got all the gold that they have, we don't have the gold that we say that we have, and we need to go to a neutral reserve currency to settle accounts between countries, which we clearly do, or else Triffin's dilemma blows this whole thing up, and go forward. Bitcoin's the right choice because we've got the technical people to do it, and we're in the right position. So I think Bitcoin's got a lot going for it. It really, really does, but it's going to take time. I mean, gold had a lot going. Gold's always had a lot going for it, and I got to tell you, they know how to play this game. I mean, the other side, there's, some of them are very stupid. Okay, some of them, but some of them are very smart, and the smart ones are gonna, they're gonna fight back.
Yeah, yeah, they are. I mean, you've seen this firsthand too. Like you've personally been screwed.
I've personally seen it. I mean, I was, I was short all the financials in fall of 2008. I was up, 50% in my fund on that year. And in September, they outlawed, they banned short selling of financial stocks. I lost that 50% in 10 days. They just changed the rules. I mean, I had it right. I was Michael Burry, except I wasn't playing with CDS. I was playing with publicly traded financial stocks. Go look it up. The SEC banned short selling financial stocks, on national security basis. And when they did that, all my shit got called in and I lost millions of dollars for myself, my clients, everything. They just changed the fucking rules on me, right in the middle of the game. Right? I mean, that's what they did to the GameStop guys, right? I mean, those guys were going to bankrupt those firms. And they had them. They totally had them. And they just changed the rules, right? So
that the GameStop thing particularly had tinfoil hat Uncle Marty come out, because if you remember back in September 2019 when you had the first repo spasm and the Fed had to allow the FCC to become a primary dealer so they could essentially by proxy bail out like Citadel, Millennium 72.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened, right?
I think there were the same firms involved with GameStop, right? And
that's exactly what happened.
The Fed viewed them as systemic risk.
Yeah, there's a reason why Bernanke sits on the Citadel board. And the inside scoop from this is secondhand and just gossip, but there's sometimes some truth to some gossip, is that Ken Griffin pays him $20 million a year, and related gossip is that he's using it to buy gold. Right?
Ben?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
These guys aren't stupid. They're not stupid. And you might ask, how can he justify it? And I'm sure the way he justifies it in his mind is, look, I did what I had to do when I was in the political system and in the political arena. I mean, hell, Alan Greenspan used to be an Ayn Rand follower and wrote all kinds of treatises on how great gold was and prevented, confiscate or prevented, the state from taking your money away from you through inflation. And then he got in there and he wanted to be famous and he just forgot all that shit and just totally played the game. And I mean, look, the power and the money that these people have, it makes it very hard for them to do what's right. I mean, Janet Yellen getting paid $7 million for speeches, that's just a blatant bribe. It's just blatant. I mean.
Hey, getting paid 250 grand an hour is it's normal.
Yeah, it's totally normal, right? When you're an economics professor, right? Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. And, they don't even hide it anymore. I mean, it's, they recently, there's clearly this campaign to change the Fed, right? And so they've got two of them to resign. They're both hawks. And they're about to probably get Powell to resign. And who knows? They'll probably put Stephanie Kelton and some doves in there. And they're greasing the runway to have another print-a-thon, which is at that point, that's going to give the next, up leg to gold and silver and probably to Bitcoin as well. So, it's the same old. And it's because of the math. I mean, you can't taper a Ponzi. And, and again, in the speech I'm going to publish in my quarterly report, which is on my website, you can see there's a great chart that just shows the accelerating growth of the money supply. And, you've got to keep that accelerating. I mean, they grew the Fed balance sheet $3 trillion in 3-year period after 2008. Well, they did that in a couple of months. And this time around, the next time the market turns down severely, they're going to have to do 10, and then the next time, I mean, the Fed's going to have $100 trillion balance sheet, in 5 years at the rate they're going, or everything's going to implode. And, they're both bad outcomes, but my gut is that push comes to shove, they'll always pick the inflation because kick the can and at least they think they can kind of stay alive and outrun it in some way. And that's what von Havenstein thought in Weimar too in 1921. And eventually it just gets out of hand. I mean, the tipping point for both Bitcoin and gold will come when the bond market really starts to sell off. I mean, the thing I watch like a hawk is the 10-year. Mm-hmm. The 10-year yield really starts to roll. And the other thing I watch related to that, really interesting thing happened in March. Remember March of 2020 when the COVID thing came down? There was a time when the 10-year went no bid and the rate started to go up. Mm-hmm. That was friggin' huge. That had to scare the living crap out of the Fed. And if the 10-year starts to go no bid and interest rates start to go up aggressively, now they probably got all the Band-Aids in place, through this reverse repo and other things, having the bank buying bonds. But the point is, eventually they're going to have to monetize the entire bond market. And at that point, when you're running a deficit that's equal to 50%, when you're spending 50% more than, or 100% more than you collect in taxes, i.e. you collect 3 trillion in taxes, you spend 6, that just can't last. And then you can't get foreigners to buy the other 3. You've got to print it yourself. I mean, that's just the definition of monopoly money. And so it's only a matter of time. I mean, we call this CSIP, it's substitution inflation. I mean, as people begin to see that the money is losing value, they're going to gravitate towards Bitcoin. They already have, and that's why it's seen such a lift. And it's the one fire alarm that's working. And they're also going to gravitate towards gold and silver. And, it's going to be one of these, it's the most asymmetric trade I've ever seen. And sound money people are going to end up with all the marbles, in my opinion. And that's a beautiful thing. And I'm not really in it to win all the marbles. I mean, if I get marbles, I'm going to use them to try and push for sound money, because I really care a lot more about sound money than I do about making a profit. But, it's just going to happen because it's human psychology. I mean, when you know that what you have in savings is melting, you look to go someplace where it won't melt, because it's just self-preservation. You've worked, especially if you're older, you've worked your whole life to earn, a certain amount of savings. You're going to realize you need to protect it. And that's why I say to all of my clients, how much of your assets are allocated in sound money bets? And to me, the three most obvious sound money bets are gold, silver, and Bitcoin, and gold and silver stocks. And then after that, real estate. I mean, you're actually already starting to see some of this, Marty, in real estate. I mean, people say, well, why is the real estate going up so much? Well, they're just doing the Hugo Stinnes trade, right? I mean, real estate's up 23%. Okay, so you got an asset is real, and you can use it, and it's going to grow in value. Last year it grew 23%, and you can borrow money, 30-year money at 3% to buy it. Well, that's a friggin' no-brainer. I mean, you just, right? I got an asset that's going up at some number that's north of 9, and I can borrow at 3. Hell, give me more of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's going on there. And that's what I'm describing is Austrians know that's the beginning of a crack up boom. Everyone says the money's bad. I got to get stuff,
Well, you mentioned Rudy Van Havenstein.
Yeah.
Shout out to the parody account on Twitter.
Oh, isn't he he is so fabulous. I've interacted with him a lot. He is great.
I've been following him since like 2012. He was actually in my early years of getting into the Austrian school was very formative, but transitioning to the actual Havenstein, that's something I've been saying on this podcast for the last year. And I wrote about it last April. I was like, whoa, people, like what we're doing right now with the Fed printing all this money at the same time that they're locking down the economy and preventing people going from work is not exactly what the Weimar Republic did, but it's very similar. They told factory workers to stay home, printed money, and dumped it on them. And
very close. Yeah.
When it comes to like calling an end to I want to like, especially when you consider the supply chain crunch that we're under right now, and you have commodities, energies, particularly going up, parabolic. Like I think this winter, if it's a cold winter, could be very interesting in terms of
things appear to be moving pretty quickly now. I mean, and I look at a lot of touch points. I mean, Egon van Graaritz does some good work on this, and Alistair McLeod. I mean, there are a lot of good folks on Twitter who've done the analysis here, and it would appear to me that we're reaching the inflection point in the curve where it's not going to take much. I mean, they know they need to hold gold under 2,000. They're working like hell to do it, but it's going to break through. And when it does, it's going to run like a scalded dog. I mean, the same way I think they're probably working hard to keep Bitcoin under 60, around 60. And if it breaks it and starts to run, look, I mean, there had to be some very, very scared people when Bitcoin went on the run from 10 to 60, whenever it was last year. I mean, there had to be some people who were just like, holy shit, this is a serious problem.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's basically saying, guys, your money's failing, right? Because in Bitcoin terms, I mean, the dollar is getting destroyed.
Absolutely. Right? Decimated.
Yeah.
Dollar sat parity, not too far away. But
yeah, right. A few more years, but it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the other thing. So like I'm a very strong believer in like these hyperinflationary events are part due to the expansion of the monetary supply, then they're part social, right? And the social aspect is when people lose faith, that's when things really get weird. And I think we're beginning to see that too. I mean, last week you had Tucker Carlson go on with whether you love him or hate him, he did a 10.5-minute segment on inflation and the effects of QE, and it was just very cogent. He's speaking to an audience of millions of people saying, hey, it's not your your politicians are certainly part of the blame, but you should be looking at the central bank and how much money they're printing. And then my wife, who's a Bitcoiner, and she gets the whole thing, but she's still very much involved with pop culture. She's sharing articles with me from the Daily Mail in the UK, which is essentially like a tabloid, a rag, if you will, and they're warning their readers about inflation. They're saying, hey, the Fed and the Bank of England are telling you that inflation is this, but they're just showing like grocery store prices going up exponentially. And they're lying to you. Like the on the social side of things are starting to get out that were previously not talked about by certain talking heads or publishers, if you will.
Right. And again, all it takes is for everybody at the margin to go buy sound assets. And for those sound, once these sound assets really start to break upward, then it's really going to get interesting, because the bond market, the stock market, all these, people are gonna, I mean, I like to say to my clients, I mean, this is, it's like the housing thing. It's a Michael Burry trade. It's very asymmetric. And so once this happens, there's not going to be a do-over. Imagine if tomorrow Bitcoin were at 250. I mean, it could happen. It could, in 6 months, Bitcoin could go to $250,000. And by the way, if that happened, I would imagine gold would go to $3,000. Okay. And, all the companies in my portfolio that are trading at 3 times cash flow, they'd all be 4-baggers. And, that would wake people up when people would say, hang on a second, something is really going on here. And some would say, oh, I'll sell into that. It's a bubble. Well, and others would go, no. This is currency failure. This is what it looks like. I've had, actually on Twitter, I've had a lot of people from foreign countries come to me, Argentinians especially, come to me with DMs and saying things like, oh yeah, I know exactly where you are. It's like within the next 2 years, man, it's happening.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Kind of like, oh yeah, we saw this exact same thing. You're about 2 years away from, the end game. I mean, it's happening now. It really is.
The second interview on this podcast back in the fall of 2017 was with a man named Santiago Siri from Argentina. And he the first story he told about his experience with hyperinflation was running to the grocery store with his mother to go buy things as fast as possible on payday so that they could get as much food as possible before the prices change. And again, my wife going to the grocery store, she comes back, she's like, it was this much this week. It was $25 more this week. Like, you're starting to see it here. But people don't want to believe it can happen here. We're America. The best country to ever live. It could never happen here.
Yeah. Well, look at the, it is happening, and it's funny. It does it in unusual places. Copper just went nuts, and zinc has gone nuts. Now, some of this is supply chain. It is kind of a perfect storm of inflationary stuff. You got the ports all backed up, and you got supply and demand. I was talking to a fellow this morning about stuff, and he was telling me a story. He was in Canada, and he said there was some high-end Toyota truck that he was trying to buy, and the sticker was 50, but they had a $30,000 what they called supply premium on it. So if he wanted to buy the new one off the lot, he was going to have to pay 80 for it, right? Right. It's and that's what happens, right? It's economics 101. You take the supply and you restrict it, you leave the demand the same, and guess what? Your prices are going up. Yeah. So 40 years of deflation from 1981 to present, 40 years of deflation. If this isn't turning the corner, then I'm, I don't know, then I'm just crazy. I'm blind, deaf, and dumb. And this has got to be turning the corner. The inflation is raging everywhere. Now, can they get it back down from raging to just high? Sure, maybe they can. But then we're not going back to deflation. And yet the stock market and the bond market are still kind of thinking, well, maybe we'll get back to this is transitory. Maybe we'll get back to a deflationary world. And I just don't see it. I don't see it. And I think as they wake up to that fact, the assets that sound money people hold, I think we are going to be stunned with what happens to us in the next couple of years. That's my opinion. Just stunned. And it's going to be kind of like pinch yourself and, let's try and remember to be humble. Let's try and remember to help the people that are hurting, because there are going to be a lot of people hurting. And more importantly, let's advocate. Let's take whatever wealth we've got and let's advocate to fix this broken system so that the whole country doesn't go down the shitter. The system's a mess, right?
Fucked up thing about the situation. It's not only our country, like everybody, the nature of the world economy is so intertwined with the United States.
Well, absolutely. And China's just as levered as we are, if not more, as this Evergrande and other stuff have pointed out to us. But they're able to put it back in the can pretty easily. They having a command and control economy is it's a nice thing for them.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Remnant, right? Because I think that, and I don't want to give up too much about your paper that you're going to drop. And I had some visibility into last week because I think that's important. Like we were discussing before we hit record, it is a bit nauseating when Bitcoiners attack gold advocates when we should probably be hand in hand together as sound money advocates.
Well, true, but to be fair, there've been some gold advocates who've been real a-holes to Bitcoiners too, and we all know who they are. So, and part of what I've tried to do throughout all my workings, I believe in sound money above and beyond everything else. I think sound money is a moral issue, and I think the remnant is what I refer to as the group of people who believe in the rules that were established in the Constitution in 1789. Gold and silver are money. We should live in a sound money environment. The government should be minimal. It should be controlled. You should have all these branches that balance one another, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, all of that has over time gotten degraded and thrown in the dust heap of history. And it was just one chip at a time. Roosevelt takes away the gold. The Supreme Court rules this way and that way. But the remnant knows, we live by what I consider to be libertarian natural law, which is, don't do harm to anyone else and take care of your own. And that's what the remnant is to me. And, we'll rebuild if and when the system collapses. And I think sadly, it's very likely to collapse. I want to be part of that. I think your generation will be part of that. Many people will be part of that, trying to rebuild it. And the bright side is, from my studying of history, countries that do have collapse, it's obviously going to be terrible and brutal, and many will be hurt. But when if we don't get into a shooting war and we don't exchange nuclear arms and we don't start killing people, all the factories and people and intelligence are still there. And if we go back to sound money, we might actually be able to kind of get things going in the right direction fairly quickly. Now, who's rich and who's poor will have changed a fair amount. And some of that, frankly, would be good. I think some of the rich today aren't exactly the most admirable people, but that's okay. And and then we can put it back on a sound basis, and have a deflationary world where we're not just trying to grow and consume all the resources in the planet all the time. We're all looking at long-time preference things that we really enjoy. Staying healthy and living with friends and living well and getting more for less. That's, to me, that's what deflation and that's what Bitcoin is all about, is getting more for less, being more productive because you have a long time preference. If you have a long time preference, you can invest in productivity. If you're a Keynesian, you think, no, screw productivity. We need more demand and growth right now, no matter what it takes. Let's borrow from tomorrow and saddle our kids with these debts. That's just wrong. That's just blatantly wrong. It leads to, you talk about ESG, you talk about destruction of the environment, how do we continue to grow the way we're growing in a resource constrained planet? I think I'm not sure if I got it right. I think it's St. Matthew's Island, but Google, deer lichen in Alaska. And it's a perfect example of how the carrying capacity of a certain area can be totally overwhelmed. And then you just you get a collapse. This is an island off Alaska where they introduced deer, and they were able to live off the lichen. They introduced the deer so that they could have food for the soldiers who were there during World War II. Eventually, the deer grew they got up to like a large deer population, and then there was not enough lichen for the deer. Population literally went from like 12,000 deer to zero, because they overwhelmed the resources, right? Yeah. And that's the nightmare scenario here in the world. If we just keep trying to grow without thinking about that growth, it's not a good thing.
Well, all we need is to build back better.
Yeah, that's right.
Deal where they're going to get $3.5 trillion. Excuse me, it's zero, cost zero.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna get that somehow make that cost $0, and then we're gonna go spend it, and we're gonna fix the economy that way by pumping more resources and misallocating more resources. And that's the frustrating thing for me as somebody who is in the Bitcoin mining industry, which is obviously much maligned for its energy usage. And it's hilarious because if you actually understand what's going on, which I'm sure you do, but anybody out there listening, I think that's actually what had a conversation with Luke Roman last year. I think that may have been like an aha moment for him when I made it clear, Bitcoin is going to usher in energy renaissance because it makes us as energy efficient as possible at scale over time. Because the cheapest energy resources are those that are being wasted.
Completely agree. Yeah. Completely agree. Yeah, no, I mean, look, the U.S. Military consumes like 1% of the world's oil every day. I mean, and Bitcoin is, what is it, 0.5% of the world's electricity? I mean, that's a small price to pay for sound money. I mean, sound money is worth that price in my view.
Well, again, like you said, low time preference capital allocation. People don't think about the second and third order effects, right?
Yeah.
Like, the fiat monetary system allows you to print money ex nihilo and then go misallocate it on things that
that's exactly
need
right.
energy to be to be accomplished.
Yeah, it's right. It's a broken system, very much so. But there are a lot of good indications, and I'm sure a lot of people and a lot of your listeners say. I mean, I many times I've said to myself, thank God for Bitcoin. I mean, it really does. Bitcoin fixes this, and I think it really will, and that's a beautiful thing. Having said that, I again, going back to kind of the Bitcoin gold debate. I mean, I hear this kind of, there can only be one from time to time, and perhaps in the longer term that's a possibility. But I think in the shorter term, there can be more than one, and it really does take. I mean, the enemy here is fiat money in the state. The enemy of Bitcoiners is not gold. Gold's not drawing away from Bitcoin as much as people think, and frankly, I'm part of my view is that I'm trying to do what I can to help gold people understand Bitcoin and recognize that, to protect themselves and to help improve the planet, they should support Bitcoin as well as gold. They both have a place in a portfolio.
No, I agree. And I think the point you made about gold's monetary premia already being demolished by the Fed was one that had never been brought up to me. It was actually pretty illuminating. It was like, oh shit, like you're at a point, like Bitcoiners always like, oh, we're going to demonetize gold. And you're like, it's already been demonetized. Like,
yeah, gold should be $10,000 right now. I mean, if it were trading like the way it used to trade, like when we were on the gold standard, it'd be $10,000 easily, maybe more. I mean, at $800 gold in 1980, it covered the entire U.S. money supply. And Egon did some numbers, went back and back tested it, and they found, if you take the real inflation numbers from shadow government stats, that 1980 number would be 22,000 today. So, and it's at 1,800. So it's been demonetized, not fully. I mean, it could probably go lower, but it's pretty damn demonetized. And there's a chance, and there's a chance of a reset. There's either a chance that the paper market fails, or there's a chance that, a couple of really big and important countries, I mean, you can't just write off China and Russia, that they say, okay, we get it. The money's messed up. We're going to back our currency with gold. And, that would be meaningful.
mm-hmm.
That would be very meaningful. Now, so there's room for both of these assets. There's plenty of room for both of these assets. I don't know if we did it in the discussion beforehand, but I often say there's $450 trillion of financial stuff out there, cash, stock, bonds. Okay, there's about 1.1 or 1.2 trillion of Bitcoin. There's 10 trillion of gold, but really a lot of it doesn't trade. A lot of it's in the antiquities and the central banks. There's about 5 trillion of tradable gold. There's about 1 trillion of gold stocks. So you take 5 trillion of tradable gold, you add 1 trillion of gold stocks, and you add a little over 1 trillion of Bitcoin. So you call it 7 trillion of what I consider to be hard money investments. Okay, you got 450 trillion of financial assets. You got 7 trillion of hard money investments. What happens when that 450 realizes they're in a burning house and says to themselves, holy shit, this thing's losing value every day. I got to get me some of that gold or that Bitcoin. I mean, if we went to just the rate we were at in the 1980 period, gold was 7% of total financial assets. So 7% of 450 today is 32 trillion. Okay. So that would take the 7 to the 32. So we'd almost have a 5-bagger. Mm-hmm. Okay. If we just reset to the 1980 level. And I think we're going to reset to much higher than the 1980 level. I mean, that was jacks for openers in terms of inflation. I mean, this inflation we've got coming, it's going to make the 70s look like child's play. So, if the total sound money assets go up 5x, and how's that going to get split between Bitcoin and gold? Well, probably Bitcoin's going to do better because it's emerging and it's got a technological advantage. And, I don't disagree that in many ways, it's superior to gold, but, it's not superior in every single way. And, and by the way, I mean, there's 6 billion people that know that gold is money. I mean, do the poor people in lots of areas know that Bitcoin is money? Probably not. And it's going to take time until 6 billion people accept Bitcoin as money. So,
Yeah, and you can also make the arguments may piss off some Bitcoiners, but it shouldn't. Like maybe the network itself, like could it take on 6 billion people right now from a technical perspective?
I think it could. I mean, probably not at the base layer. I mean, as you know, once the mining reward goes down enough, I mean, I met with Safe once and he said to me, look, this is, I mean, so the mining reward will be too small, even at whatever it is, even at high Bitcoin price. This is the Bitcoin, the base layer network. It's going to be like moving money. It's going to be like moving a super tanker. I mean, everything's going to be so damn valuable, and you've got the block size can only be so large. You got one every 10 minutes. That I mean, transaction may cost $50,000 or something, but who cares, because you're going to be moving $1 trillion. Yeah. And as a percentage, it's going to seem very slow. But that's why you've got these other layers, right? That's why you've got the Lightning Network, and and those will scale to handle billions, right? And so it's a beautiful thing the way they've kind of layered it up, and so I can see where it's going to work. I mean, I believe over time solutions will be found.
Yeah.
To let all 6 billion people in.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I agree too. In terms of like if hyperinflation happens in the next year or two,
like, they won't all be trading at the base layer though. I mean, no. And having one coin is going to be just like, holy shit, you own an entire coin? Are you kidding me? I mean, seriously, I think that's I think that's what our grandkids will say.
You're a whole coiner.
Yeah, right. You own a whole coin? Yeah, actually more than one.
It's it's a fascinating time. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, that's why I really liked your piece, because that's the other thing too. There's been so many warnings throughout history about money. Don't fuck up the money. Again, like you said, the founding fathers put it in the Constitution. We've seen Aristotle talk about it. Jesus throughout the money changers, and that's one thing you reference is the impure measures in your speech. And
honest weights and measures. I mean, it's right in the friggin' Bible. I mean, look, this has been going on for hundreds of years. There have been 100 hyperinflations in the last 200 years. You know how much misery that's caused? I mean, I mean, seriously, think of the families, the lives wrecked. I mean, just, it's horrible shit, right? I mean, it's really bad. And I mean, this is basic stuff. And yet the Krugmans and the Keynesians of the world, they just don't get it. They won't even acknowledge it. They won't even acknowledge it. They make fun of it. And then they talk about $1 trillion coins. It's just, I mean, and they get Nobel Prizes, right? I mean, it's like,
well, they're number one now because they're like the gold standard, led to the Depression.
Right. I mean, that's just a complete lie. I mean, once again, it just shows you that you can control the narrative for so long, but unfortunately, I mean, but natural law wins out, right? I mean, humans aren't entirely stupid. Some are, but many aren't, and natural law wins out, and so people will slowly but surely, this change is taking place. I mean, all of human history, all 6,000 years of recorded human history is crime and folly, but we have been making advances over time. And, the big advance of this next century and this fourth turning will be sound money. I mean, I read this, it's in my speech. I talk about our grandkids are going to sit around and say, can you believe that these idiots let some central bankers control the money and control the interest rates and control the money supply? What the hell were they thinking? They had to be out of their mind. Of course, the whole thing collapsed. Well, you can't have that kind of a system, right?
Like, again, it's evil, right? Because it was thrust on people.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. It is evil, but the people who were in it, they actually, I mean, evil is pretty banal. I mean, do you think the entire German population was evil? No, I mean, some were just doing their job. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, I know people who work at the Federal Reserve, and I have a hard time, like they're in the middle somewhere, and I have a hard time pointing and saying, well, that's an evil guy. I mean, I think the Fed is an evil organization. I think Jerome Powell is evil when he says that the Fed isn't leading to wealth inequality. He knows better. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But, the average guy who's working at the Fed, is he an evil person? I don't know. I mean, he's probably just misguided, and he's looking for a paycheck to go home with at night. The Fed gave him a job.
He's looking for that prestige on the resume as well.
Right. Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, there's some of that. I mean, look, I don't think he's as righteous as Bitcoiners or sound money people or people who, work an honest day for their income. I mean, but I'm not sure. I mean, who was it that said? I mean, it's hard to convince a man of something that's true if his income depends on him not believing. I think it was Upton Sinclair, I think, who said that. His income depends on him not believing it, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of that going on for sure.
a ton of it.
Yeah.
I guess I'll end it on this question. Do you think Bitcoin breaks the wheel? How if Bitcoin succeeds, sound money
Yeah.
succeeds?
Yeah. This, in my opinion, I mean, God, I pray and hope it does. I mean, and I actually believe it does too. I mean, I think it's almost God given that we were able to invent this thing that solves the biggest problem of our time, and that it's getting widely and widely adopted. And I think human beings, as messed up as we are, over time, we're slowly but surely bouncing off the guardrails to going in the right direction. And I think, I'm very convinced we'll be on a sound money standard. We will be on a Bitcoin standard. Gold will be a piece of it too. And that will happen, in my opinion, within the 10 to 15 year time window, with some rough ups and downs. I mean, one thing people should do is you should go and get on Twitter, or just Google the Myrmikan, Myrmikan, Weimar volatility chart.
Mm-hmm.
Because it shows you the ups and downs in the gold price as measured in marks during the Weimar hyperinflation. And this is why earlier, remember, we were talking about leverage.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be volatile, right? This is going to be really volatile. And my big caution I would have, having been at this for 30 some odd years, almost 40 years of investing, would be don't get leveraged. Know what you own, know why you own it. Be ready for the drawdown. Maybe keep some cash to buy the dip. I mean, and that's let me make this other point. This is important too. And people say, well, you should be 100% Bitcoin. Well, okay. If I'd have been 100% Bitcoin in 2018 or 19, I wouldn't have been able to. So I was buying Bitcoin at 17,000, 2017, Christmas time. I was with everybody else. I'm thinking that's going to 50 or 100, right? Of course, It falls to 10. I double down. It falls to 35 and a half. I double. Where did I get the money to double down? I sold gold. I had gold to sell, right? Mm-hmm. So, you got a volatile asset. There's an argument for having another asset that's less volatile. The volatile asset goes on a great run and it goes to 250. Then maybe you sell a little bit. Maybe you buy a little gold. The 250 collapses back to 125. Okay, on a relative basis, that sounds cheap again. Maybe I'll buy, take that gold and sell it and buy some Bitcoin. There's, in my opinion, there's wisdom to, in asset allocation and dollar cost averaging. And I've seen that as an investor over the years. And that's my biggest argument, to Bitcoin people. I mean, fine, you believe in it. You want to be super heavy Bitcoin, great. Hold 10% gold on the side. You know what I mean? Just hold 10, because if you get a big dip, you're going to want to be able to sell the gold to buy the dip, right? And to gold people, don't go all gold. That's ridiculous. You got this super sound, super rapidly growing money that's it's doing two things. One, it's reflecting the dilution of the money, the debasement. But two, you've got an adoption curve, and you're at 10%, and it's about to get widely adopted. It's a no friggin' brainer. If you don't have some Bitcoin allocation and you're a sound money person, you got to be shot. I mean, I mean, seriously. I mean, you just don't get it. I mean, I don't know what Peter Schiff is thinking. I just don't know. And I know a lot of other gold guys who have the same kind of view. Now, and so if we define the brackets as 90-10 one way or 90-10 the other way, and then I think everybody's got to make a choice. Where do I fall in that spectrum? What am I comfortable with? Mm-hmm. I mean, just to give you some data, my fund is 80% gold because I have the history of that. It's 20% Bitcoin, but that's growing fast. Personally, I'm more like 60% Bitcoin, 40% gold. Because I mean, I'm talking about my PA, which more or less including my allocation of my fund and so forth. So, because I believe very strongly in Bitcoin.
Well, I do as well. Thank you for. I mean, I know it. Well, I'm not. I would imagine you don't give a shit, but I know. I know it is a bit controversial to be in the gold space and to be espousing Bitcoin.
It is. I mean, it's the thing that sucks about where I am is I get shit from both sides. The toxics say, I'm talking about gold, and they're like, some guy said, why would you bring a horse when the car is available? Yeah, okay. Well, they both beat walking. And on the other side, I got the gold guys saying, are you going to believe this magic fairy dust Ponzi scheme, bullshit, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you don't really understand it. It's immutable. Money's just a record. It doesn't have to be physical, and this is an immutable record, and it's been adopted and it's growing. It's got a huge network effect going on. I mean, I think I told you, I was a big investor in the internet in '93 and it worked out great. This feels just like the internet to me, just the same thing. Mm-hmm. This thing is going to eat the world. It is just going to eat the world. Hell yeah. But in a volatile way. So don't forget that piece.
Don't use leverage, freaks.
Yeah, don't use leverage. Yeah.
Well, one last thing, I just curious myself, is we've been having this conversation. You've been saying I've learned. Like, how long as an investor? I think this would be productive and good perspective for the audience here. Like, how long did it take you to be comfortable as a quote unquote investor? How many years, decades? Like, you have a lot of.
I'm still not, but you know what is great about investing, Marty, is that it's one of like so many. You'll see as you age, and a lot of things in your life as you age, it sucks. Things go the wrong way, right? Mm-hmm. Investing is actually an intellectual exercise where seeing cycles, it does get better and it gets easier because you can see this pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I must say for the first 10 years, I kind of felt like I was groping around, really didn't know what the hell I was doing. Fortunately, I was with some older guys who were showing me, mm-hmm. and they prevented me from making what would have been some really stupid and fatal errors. So I spent 10 years kind of apprenticing and had guys who were 20 or 30 years older than me keeping me out of danger. Then I learned enough to be, okay, I think I would say 5 to 10 years in, I felt pretty comfortable. I didn't feel like I had it all nailed, but it was kind of like, okay, I get the drill here. I can do this, And so for that next 10 or 20 years, I could do it, and, ups and downs, made mistakes, but it was all good. It was all generally good. And then, so now I'm 30 years in, and it starts to feel easy. It really starts to feel easy because it's kind of like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I know exactly what this is. Oh yeah, ARC. Oh, I get it. This is Munder net. I mean, the stock market today, the triple Qs. I mean, this is the internet in 2000. I mean, it's the pattern recognition piece of it becomes very, very ingrained, and I mean, did you see the video that was on the web the guy who was talking about a stock he didn't even know what they did?
Yeah,
right.
I'll pulled something.
Oh, I'm having technical difficulties. I can't quite hear you. Yeah. Right. I mean, that was so classic, right? I mean, if that's not March of 2000, then I've never seen it. I mean, I was investing in March of 2000. I remember the mood perfectly. It's the exact same thing, right? Same. I mean, I strongly feel, this is just my gut. Your listeners may totally disagree. I'm pretty sure the top is in for the stock market. Stock market's done. Put a fork in it. Yeah. We're not, the triple Qs, they're not going higher. Mm-hmm. Tesla, I mean, all the sexy stocks, they've seen their top. I mean, I'm not a short seller, but if I were, and I could be wrong. There's one possible exception to that statement, and that is if we have a crack up boom, then everything's going higher. Yeah. Right. If we have, because the Venezuelan stock market in hyperinflation took off. Yeah. Right. And the Weimar stock market took off. So if we have a total collapse, crack up boom, then it's going higher. But absent that, if we kind of continue tripping along with the system, I think the top's in. Yeah.
Yeah, crack up boom, everything's worthless, essentially. So.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. And I hope I've added some value and helped your listeners a bit.
Well, I know you've added value to my life in the last few weeks. We've been interacting, and to me personally. So I assume that'll be felt by some of the freaks out there. At least I'm sure you will get the annoying Bitcoiners. I'm sorry, guys, that will be attacking you. But I
can live with it. I'm my skin's gotten thicker. I mean, look, it's everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I mean, some people have to learn stuff the hard way too. I mean, I do see some people, particularly the stock market bulls who are really all bulled up on the market. Boy, I gotta tell you, I feel like they got a hard lesson coming. They really do. This market could fall 50%, no problem. Absolutely no problem. Higher inflation, it's going to squeeze. I mean, we're at peak profit margins and peak multiples. That just can't continue with higher inflation. Just can't. I mean, it's over. It's just over. So
all the gold and macro guys I've been talking to in the last month, they see deflation in financial asset prices coming up, and especially, I mean, just look at the commodities market. You look at the supply chains too. Like,
yeah, right.
These economies aren't light switches. Like, the supply chain issue is not going to be resolved anytime soon, which is a shame and scary. And then the energy just compounds that, and it's part of it.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
sometimes
So anyway, yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to watch, and I'm glad to have met you, and hope that we can continue the correspondence, because it's been fun.
And it's been a lot of fun. Good luck in New Orleans this week, freaks.
Yeah, thanks.
When Larry's piece is finally published, which should be any day now, go read it if you haven't already. This will probably be posted on the day it is published, or
yeah, it's Thursday morning. I'll publish it, and Thursday I deliver the speech, so it'll be out there. I'll put it on Twitter.
All right, this will be the day before, so you'll have.
This will come out the day before. I get it.
Unless you want me to send it.
No, that's great. Whenever please put it out before. Yeah.
Okay, there will be some anticipation. You guys will have to wait some amount of hours before you're able to read it, but I highly recommend you do read it when it does become available. Larry, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Marty. I really enjoyed it.
We're definitely going to have to do this again. I can't wait to meet in person and have a steak with you.
Absolutely. Would like to do that. Yeah.
Keep fighting the good fight. We are the Remnant. This is a virtuous fight.
That's a fact. We'll win. We've got a tailwind. This stuff's on our side. I mean, it's just be ready for some zigs and zags. I've been doing this a long time. I can tell you, we've got, they're going to be curveballs coming at us, but we'll be fine. Yeah.
Prepare, freaks. Prepare.
Yeah. No leverage. Keep the leverage manageable. That's my big piece of advice.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Peace and love, freaks.
Thanks.